In the highlands of Nduma, the sky was not just a canopy of blue. It was a restless thing, alive with fury, especially when the cry of a newborn reached its ears. The villagers believed that each child's first breath stirred the clouds, that their arrival offended whatever spirits lived above. And so, with every new birth, the storms came, rain that fell sideways, winds that tore thatch from roofs, and lightning that zigzagged through the sky like angry veins. In time, fear demanded a sacrifice. Elua was 5 when the midwife declared her mother cursed. The rains had soaked her birth blanket. Thunder cracked the instant her umbilical cord was severed. They whispered she had brought the storm with her first breath. Her father refused to believe it, but his disbelief didn't matter long. A bolt struck his fishing boat the next season. His body was never recovered. After that, no one defended Elua. And when she turned 10 and a storm came with another child's birth, they tied her to the gate. It became tradition. Whenever the skies darkened and thunder began its slow grumble like a lion stretching, the villagers would fetch Elua. They'd wrap rope around her small wrists, bind her to the gate that marked the entrance of Nduma, and leave her there beneath the open sky. Her feet bare, her back straight, her eyes always watching the clouds. But Elua never screamed. She never begged. She simply stood, lashes soaked with rain, lips unmoving as the wind wailed through the valley. Some found her silence unnerving. Others called it pride. But to the storm it seemed to matter. Lightning never touched her. Not once. Instead, it danced above her, always wild and bright, but never descending. And sometimes, when it arced across the sky, the bolt looked like a hand, fingers outstretched, reaching for her. As if it longed to be freed from the sky and held in her palm. Seasons passed and children were born and the ritual continued. Elua grew taller, her hair long and coiled like serpents behind her. Her eyes, once full of childlike curiosity, now shimmered with something deeper. Not sorrow. Not hate. But knowing. One afternoon, an old woman approached as Elua was being tied for the 6th time. The storm hadn't yet come, but the clouds were already swirling like a pot stirred by unseen hands. "Do you speak to them?" the woman asked, her voice rough like old bark. Elua turned her head slowly. "Who?" "The storm spirits. The ones they say you anger." Elua blinked. "I don't speak." "Not to us," the old woman rasped. "But I've seen the lightning hesitate when it nears you. I've seen your lips move when the wind howls." "I listen," Elua whispered. "That is enough." The woman stepped back, her face unreadable. "Then perhaps you are not the curse. Perhaps you are the answer." That night, the storm was unlike any the village had seen. It did not begin with thunder, but with silence. A stillness so sharp it made the goats bleat nervously and the trees freeze in their swaying. Then came the lightning, not one bolt, but a storm of them, weaving across the sky like golden serpents. The villagers huddled in their huts, clutching charms and muttering prayers. But outside, Elua stood tied to the gate, rain sliding down her face like tears she refused to shed. And above her, a single bolt descended, not to strike, but to hover. It hung in the air, inches from her fingertips. The rope on her wrists began to smoke. Then, in a blinding flash, the lightning coiled around her wrists and the rope fell. Elua stepped forward. The villagers gasped from their windows. The storm parted. Not slowly, not gently, but instantly. The clouds peeled away as if afraid. The wind halted. The lightning vanished. And Elua stood free. From that day they never tied her again. Instead, they watched her warily, unsure whether to worship or banish her. She began walking into the forest during rains, and when she returned, her dress was always dry. The storms would rage elsewhere, never in Nduma. Children grew without fear. Fields flourished. But the villagers grew uneasy. Some said she was bargaining with spirits. Others said she was becoming one. The chief summoned her. They met in the Hall of Stones, where voices echoed and truth was meant to be spoken. "What are you, Elua?" he asked, fingers tightening around his staff. "I am the one you tied," she answered. "And now?" "I am the one the storm untied." He stared. "Do you control them?" "I speak no commands." "Then why do they obey?" Elua tilted her head. "Because I listened when none of you did." The chief ordered her watched. But those who followed her into the forest never returned the same. One came back mute. Another blind. A third spoke only in riddles, carving lightning symbols into every tree. Rumors bloomed like weeds. One night, a boy disappeared during a storm. They searched the village, then the forests, calling his name. They found him 2 days later, at the gate. Sitting beside Elua. Smiling. Unharmed. He said the storm carried him, he told his weeping mother. And she told it where to go. That night, villagers left offerings at her doorstep: feathers, salt, copper thread. Quiet apologies wrapped in gifts. But Elua took none of them. She painted lightning bolts on her gate in ash. One evening, thunder rolled over the hills like drums. The sky pulsed red and violet. The villagers shivered, certain it was a warning. But Elua walked to the center of the village and raised her hands. The lightning descended, not to strike, but to swirl around her wrists like golden bracelets. Then, with a single gesture, she threw her hands into the sky. And the storm vanished. It didn't fade. It didn't travel. It obeyed. The villagers fell to their knees. That night, children began calling her the Storm Mother. But Elua did not smile. She returned to the gate, sat beneath it, and whispered to the sky, "I do not want their worship. Only their truth." A truth no one else had bothered to learn, that the storms had never been curses. They had been messengers, mourners, witnesses. And she, the one they tied for silence, had been their interpreter all along. Elua grows used to the ritual, though no child should ever have to. The first time they tied her, she screamed. Not for help, not in fear, but because the rope was coarse, and she did not yet know how silence could protect the soul. The thunder had cracked above, and the elders watched with grim patience, waiting to see if the storm would pass. It did, but not before the lightning etched a scar near the village well, as though signing its disapproval. After that, they tied her more gently, perhaps out of guilt or maybe out of superstition. Some villagers left banana leaves beneath her knees to soften the stone. Others looked away when her mother wept behind a curtain of her own dread. The storm always came after a birth. Always. And since Elua had once touched a baby's foot as it cried its first cry, they believed her body had stirred the sky. The ropes left marks that looked like vines burned into her skin. She began to sleep with her arms curled close to her chest as if to hide the evidence. At dawn she would walk back into the house like a ghost soaked in dew. Her mother would not speak. Her brother, once defiant, had learned to keep his head low. She no longer asked why. The question had no answer that could change the wind. Years passed. Elua stopped flinching at the first drop of rain. She learned to breathe slow and deep when the thunder rolled in like a herd of buffalo. When they came to fetch her with their blank faces and sacred knots, she would walk herself to the gate and sit without complaint, as if she were the watcher, not the watched. Her voice, once bright and stubborn, became a thing folded neatly behind her teeth. She used it only when she needed to, and even then with care, like a needle passed through thin cloth. Children grew up learning her name in hushes, as if saying it might summon wind. To some she became a myth still breathing. To others a warning carved from flesh. One night, as the sky twisted dark with distant lightning, the storm arrived slower than usual. It paused at the edge of the hills, like a beast sniffing the earth. The villagers gathered in silence, their hands clutching charms woven from feathers and ash. They knew what came next. A baby had been born just before sunset, a boy with sharp lungs and a birthmark shaped like a tear. They tied Elua to the gate once more, and though her skin winced beneath the new rope, she did not move. Her eyes looked far beyond the village, past the rolling fog into the heart of the sky. Her breath, barely visible in the cold night, drifted upward like smoke that refused to vanish. And then the storm did not begin. The sky held its breath. A single strike of lightning forked across the clouds and vanished before it could touch ground. Thunder rumbled low and long, but no rain fell. The wind circled above the village, thick with something old. It was as if the storm had turned back to look. Elua tilted her head up, her eyes wide, not in fear but in knowing. The air buzzed around her wrists, not from the rope, but from something that touched the skin without form. The rope shifted slightly, pulled not by tension but by attention, as if it too were listening. She did not dare speak. All around her, the village waited. Some murmured prayers. Some stayed hidden in their huts, daring not to witness what might be blasphemy. A few of the bolder men tightened the knots again, afraid the silence might mean disobedience. But the storm still did not break. The night grew deeper, the stars flickering between cracks in the clouds like eyes blinking uncertainly. One of the midwives dropped a basin of water, and the splash echoed too loud. Still the lightning did not strike. Elua closed her eyes. Something inside her chest shifted, like a door creaking open. She felt warmth bloom in her palms, though they held nothing. It was not fire, nor blood, nor breath. It was presence, as if the sky had stepped into her body. The storm, it seemed, was watching. She remembered, suddenly, a dream she once had as a child. In it, she stood atop a hill of woven branches, and the sky poured its fury into her open hands. She did not burn. She sang. And in the dream, lightning coiled around her wrists like bangles made of light. The ropes broke not from struggle but because they wanted to. Now, under the waiting sky, she wondered if that dream had been memory. The wind pressed against her cheeks like a question. And in her silence, she answered. Not with words but with stillness. With acceptance. With something stronger than defiance, understanding. A drop of rain finally fell, landing softly on her shoulder. She did not flinch. Another drop kissed the back of her hand. The villagers gasped. Rain was the signal. Rain meant release or ruin. But no one moved. The storm, unusually careful, stepped forward with a second sigh of thunder. The sky no longer cracked with rage. It pulsed, steady, curious, and almost mournful. For the first time, some villagers wondered if the storm too was tired. If it had been searching for someone who could hold its sorrow. The elders did not speak, their eyes fixed on the girl they had once called cursed. Her silhouette glowed faintly in the darkness, a thread against the night's fabric. And the ropes around her wrists, though tight, no longer seemed cruel, they seemed ceremonial, as though the storm had chosen her not as a sacrifice, but as a bridge. A young girl, no older than 7, crept out from behind a storage hut. She held a scrap of fabric in her hand, embroidered with tiny suns. She had never known Elua's voice but she had seen her eyes. She walked closer even as her mother hissed for her to stop. The child placed the fabric near Elua's feet and whispered, I dreamt of you flying. Elua looked down, her face unreadable. But her fingers moved, twitching once, a small, sharp motion like the flick of a thread being tied. Suddenly the storm broke open, not in rage but in song. The thunder roared, but with rhythm. The lightning danced in spirals above the trees, bright and deliberate. Rain poured, but it did not drench, it painted. Every drop left behind a shimmer, and the ground did not flood. Instead it bloomed. The ropes fell from Elua's wrists, not snapped, not burned, untied by unseen hands. She stood slowly, her knees stiff from hours of waiting. The gate creaked behind her, a sound like breath being held too long. She turned toward the open field, and the rain parted slightly as if to make way. The villagers did not move. They were afraid not of her but of what they had never understood. Elua walked forward. The storm followed. Not to strike but to learn. From that night on, the village no longer tied her to the gate. When the thunder came, the people stepped outside with bare hands and offered Elua small bits of cloth, asking nothing, giving all. And though she still said little, the storm had already heard her. And it had listened. Lightning cracked across the sky, splitting the clouds like a blade against old cloth. The villagers gasped from behind their windows, peering out with the same mix of fear and curiosity that had marked every storm since Elua had come of age. Rain hammered the rooftops, and thunder rumbled like the voice of an old god demanding tribute. But Elua, tied once more to the village gate, did not flinch. Her hair clung to her face, drenched and cold. Her wrists, bound with the same worn ropes, no longer bled when the storm came. The skin had toughened, scarred over with time and silence. Around her, the wind spun wildly, carrying with it leaves, whispers, and old prayers from frightened mouths. The gate creaked behind her back, wooden beams soaked through but unyielding. The storm was loud, but within her chest, everything was still. Then it happened. A strange hush fell, sudden and deep, as though the world held its breath. Even the rain paused, its rhythm broken. In that eerie moment, Elua raised her head. Her eyes, once dulled by years of accusation, now shimmered with a quiet challenge. A single bolt of lightning danced across the clouds, then dipped unnaturally low like it had noticed her. Like it had heard her silence. She did not scream. Her fingers twitched, small against the ropes. The lightning twisted again, not down, not toward the trees or the earth, but toward her. The villagers watching from their doors gasped, slamming shutters, hiding children behind their backs. They muttered words of protection, curses, or both. But Elua did not cower. Her eyes met the crackling light, and for a brief second, it hovered above her, pulsing like a heartbeat in the sky. Her chest rose slowly as if she was breathing for the storm. And then, the impossible. She lifted her hand. The rope resisted, tightening against her wrist. But with a sound like dry bark splitting, the fibers unraveled. She did not pull. The rope let go. Her hand rose higher, fingers spread open toward the sky. The lightning curved, bent at a sharp angle, and struck the ground just a few feet from her. But she did not flinch. Instead, A pulse of white light shot through her fingertips. The glow was not violent, not hot, but deep and steady, like the calm at the heart of a flame. Her hands shimmered. Not burning, not destroyed, but illuminated. The storm shuddered. The villagers watched through cracks in their walls. Some sank to their knees. Others whispered her name like a prayer they hadn't dared utter before. Elua looked up. The sky trembled. Clouds that had hung low and heavy for hours began to pull back, as if a hand was sweeping them away from the mountains. The wind died. The thunder fell silent. And then the rain stopped, mid-drop. Like someone had paused the world. And just like that, the ropes around her waist fell away, soaked and limp. No blade had touched them. She stepped forward. The mud did not cling to her feet. A strange stillness surrounded her, as though the storm had drawn a circle of respect around her path. She did not look back at the gate. She did not speak. But in her chest, something had shifted. The storm had come for her again, and it had bowed. The clouds above scattered like birds from a hunter's arrow. Stars peeked through for the first time in weeks. The moon unveiled herself, pale and full, watching. Elua stood alone in the open, her skin steaming gently from where the lightning had kissed the air around her. She turned her glowing palm to the earth, closed it into a fist, and the wind, ever so gently, obeyed. Behind her, one of the ropes lifted into the air without hands. It coiled once, twice, and then gently rested on the gate as though it, too, had witnessed something holy. The people emerged slowly. No one dared approach. "She's touched," one old man whispered. "No," said another, voice trembling. The sky, it listened to her. From the far end of the village, a baby cried. The first sound after the storm's silence. It did not sound afraid. It sounded awake. Elua did not wait for applause or apologies. She walked toward her hut, each step sure and quiet. Her soaked dress clung to her like the memory of something left behind. Her hands, now darkened with power and light, curled gently at her sides. As she passed the well, the water shimmered. A thin arc of lightning flickered in its reflection, not in the sky but in her eyes. The elders met that night, speaking in circles, their voices filled with questions. But none dared summon her. They feared her, not with hatred anymore but with awe. The one who had never begged, never wept, never screamed. The girl who had raised her hand, and the storm had retreated. No one would tie her again. And far above, the clouds whispered to each other, their voices softer now. They had seen a girl who never cried, reach into their heart and touch something they had forgotten, a quiet, ancient knowing. And the lightning, that wild and hungry thing, pulsed once more in the sky, before folding itself back into silence. But it waited, remembered her. That night, sleep does not come like it used to. It does not feel like escape or silence. It feels like a door opening. Elua lies on the reed mat inside her small hut. The air hums with a faint electricity, not loud enough to frighten, but enough to keep the hairs on her arms raised. Outside, the village is quiet, too quiet as if even the frogs and crickets are waiting. The storm is gone, yet something lingers, heavy and soft as smoke. She closes her eyes, and dreams. In the dream, a figure walks toward her, not like a person walks but like lightning moves, quick, sharp, flickering in and out of place. It is not male or female. It is not clothed or bare. It is light. A glowing, tall body made entirely of flame and thunder and the sky's hidden breath. The air around it pulses with power, bending as it nears. Elua doesn't run. She doesn't bow. She stands still, staring. The figure stops a breath away. It leans down, and though its mouth is just a blur of shifting light, she hears it speak. Not in the village tongue. Not in the priest's language. It speaks in hers. The language no one else knew she remembered, the one her mother had sung to her before the village outlawed her voice. Free me. The words aren't shouted. They come like rain, soft, cold, clear. Her heart jolts. Free me. Again. And then it lifts a glowing hand and touches her forehead. She expects heat, but instead, there is only a shiver, as if her bones remembered something ancient. She opens her eyes with a gasp. Morning. Not stormy. Not hot. But alive. She sits up quickly, her fingers tingling. When she lifts her hands, sparks leap from her fingertips, tiny flickers of white and blue that vanish as fast as they came. Her breath catches. She blinks once, twice. The room is quiet, but she feels watched, not in fear but in presence. Something is listening. Outside, birds begin to sing. Not the usual disjointed calls of the forest, but a rhythm, a song. And then, a fluttering of wings. She rises and steps out. Birds sit on her roof. On the fence. in the trees around her hut. So many their colors blur together, reds, yellows, blues. None chirp. They simply look at her. One hops down. Then another. And another. She walks toward the path leading to the stream and they follow, dozens of them. Overhead, they form a moving crown of wings and feathers, circling in lazy spirals. Some villagers peek through windows. Children point. An old woman crosses herself and turns away. But no one dares speak her name. As she walks, the trees, tall, gnarled, old as memory, seem to bend. Not with the wind. There is no wind. But with intention. Their trunks lean ever so slightly. Branches reach downward. Leaves turn to face her. She passes and it feels as though the forest is breathing her in. The earth beneath her feet grows soft and warm. She touches a vine, and it curls gently around her wrist before letting go. At the stream, the water doesn't ripple until she kneels beside it. Then a pulse. Like a heartbeat. She cups it in her hands. The reflection does not show her alone. Behind her, in the water's skin, the figure of lightning stands once more, just for a second. Watching. Waiting. "Free me," she whispers aloud. The birds do not fly away. For the rest of the day, the village watches her from a distance. A boy drops a fruit in front of her and runs. She does not pick it up. She does not smile. She simply walks. The birds follow. By afternoon, children begin to gather near her hut, not to taunt, not to throw stones, but to sit quietly, as if drawn by something they do not understand. One girl places a flower near Elua's door. Another brings a broken feather. When night comes again, the trees around the village creak like old throats clearing to speak. That evening, lightning dances again on the horizon, but it does not strike. It waits. Inside her hut, Elua places her hands on her lap. Sparks flicker once more between her fingers. Not wild. Not angry. Alive. She looks up at the thatched roof. Somewhere above, the storm watches. Somewhere inside her, something begins to stir, not a power she took but a power that chose her. The lightning is not her enemy. It is not her punishment. It is her companion. And it is waiting to be freed. Whispers began to grow like roots beneath the village soil. They murmured under doorways, slithered through cooking fires, and wrapped themselves around the necks of elders who had not slept peacefully since the last storm. Elua walked with birds now. Trees bent to greet her. Her fingers sparked even without clouds in the sky. No one had seen her scream or cry since the ropes fell away, but somehow her silence thundered louder than any voice. "She is not a girl anymore," one elder muttered, crouched beside the shrine. "She is a vessel," said another. "But for what?" "She is a danger," whispered the priest, eyes flickering. "We were wrong to leave her alone." And so, on the 7th day after the storm kissed her skin and left her glowing, they came again. This time it was not with ropes or hushed prayers. It was not under the excuse of ritual or mercy. They came with iron. 6 elders, cloaked in the night's shadow. 2 strong men carrying chains forged in the fire they said had once sealed a spirit. The priest led them, clutching a bone carved with old symbols, a relic from a forgotten god. They found Elua sitting near the shrine tree, alone but not alone. The birds roost above her. A fox crouched at her feet. Moonlight shimmered faintly on her skin, and her eyes, they no longer looked like the eyes of a girl who waited for rescue. They were the eyes of something awake. "Forgive us," the priest lied as he stepped forward. She did not run. She did not cry. She only looked at him, that long, quiet look that made the air feel heavy, like the moment before lightning splits a tree. Then she stood. The chains were fastened tight, around her ankles, her wrists, her waist. The elders wrapped them twice, 3 times, locking each with rusted iron seals. A child who had once thrown stones now watched silently from behind a hut, clutching his mother's hand. No storm came that night. But the village did not sleep. They placed her in the old hut, the one near the thorn trees where wild dogs howled. A guard sat outside with a spear. No one dared approach. And yet, above the village, clouds gathered. Not fast. Not loud. Slowly. Patiently. Like something that had waited for centuries and was no longer in a hurry. By morning, the sky was gray. By noon, it was bruised purple. And just before dusk, it cracked. Thunder did not roll in gently. It roared, like an angry mother awakened. The air turned sharp, the kind that tastes of blood and broken promises. Children screamed. Animals scattered. Pots shattered without being touched. Then came the strike. Not in the fields. Not in the trees. But straight down, upon the roof of the hut that held Elua. Fire did not follow. Smoke did not rise. Just light. Blinding, searing, golden blue light. The guards fell back. The door split open. The chains melted. Not twisted, not burned, dissolved as if they had never been real. And standing in the middle of it all was Elua. Unharmed. Untouched. Unblinking. The storm pulsed above her like a heartbeat. Behind her, the birds returned, 100 strong, feathers glowing like coals. The fox slinked out from under a bush and rubbed against her foot. Trees near the village began to sway as though in applause. And Elua? She said nothing. She simply looked at them, the priest, the elders, the crowd gathering at a distance. Some dropped to their knees. Others fled. But most stood in silence, caught between fear and awe. She cannot be cursed, said one woman softly. No curse walks with grace. But no blessing shatters chains, a man answered. She was bound in rope and the rope fell. She was bound in iron and the storm tore it. What else must we bind her with? The priest shouted, eyes wild now. She is unnatural. We must bury her before the sky takes her fully. No, whispered an elder who had remained quiet until now. We already buried her once. And the sky refused it. The villagers were divided. Some wanted her gone, far into the forest, back to the winds. Others brought gifts of salt and oil, unsure if she was goddess or ghost. Children watched her with wide eyes. One reached out and touched her hand. A spark leapt between them and the boy smiled. Elua smiled too, barely. But enough. That night the village did not sleep. Not for fear. But because the sky remained above them like a watchful parent, humming gently, pulsing with quiet light. And Elua stood at the edge of the compound, hair lifted by unseen wind, chains broken at her feet, and birds roosting along her shoulders like ornaments of the storm. The question was no longer whether she was cursed or chosen. The question was, what had they awakened when they tried to bind her again? The skies did not roar anymore. They lingered. The clouds, thick and full as swollen bellies, circled the village like quiet sentinels. Every morning they hovered just above the tallest trees. Every evening they settled lower, like breath exhaled across the roofs. But no thunder rolled. No lightning cracked. Not a drop of rain touched the ground. They were not storms in slumber. They were storms in wait. Elua moved through the village with no chains around her wrists and no shadows in her step. She wore no crown, but the air followed her as if she wore one. Her hair lifted in the breeze even when the wind stood still. Her feet stirred dust that glimmered faintly in the sun. Children followed at a distance, not out of fear but curiosity. Animals no longer scurried away. A snake once curled at her feet and slithered off unharmed. When she passed by the great baobab, its branches leaned slightly toward her, creaking gently as if bowing. And still she said nothing. Not since the lightning touched her chains. Not since the iron fell like water. Her silence now was not weakness. It was weight. It sat on the village like heat before a downpour, thick and pressing. Her quiet was a language the sky understood. The elders watched her from behind cracked doors. Their prayers, once loud and confident, had become whispers. They burned herbs. They offered kola nuts. They slaughtered chickens whose blood soaked the ground but brought no peace. The priest aged quickly, lines carving themselves into his face like punishment from the heavens. He muttered to his forgotten gods, but no bone or charm answered him. His dreams were filled with cracking skies and a voice that was not a voice, saying only one thing. She has not spoken yet. One morning the clouds came down so low they kissed the tops of the huts. Elua stood at the edge of the village, near the old shrine tree. Her hands were behind her back. Her gaze was fixed on the sky as if listening to something no one else could hear. That was when Elder Ajak, the oldest of them all, came forward. He had once ordered her silence. He had once poured ashes in a circle to trap her spirit. Now he walked with shaking hands and knees that barely held him. The villagers watched. No one moved. He stepped through the quiet and stopped before her. Elua, he said, voice barely above a breath. We were wrong. She did not turn. Elua, he said again, falling to his knees. We were afraid. We feared what we did not understand. We wrapped your power in rope and called it evil. We saw your strength and named it storm. But the storm was never against us, it was against the chains. Still she did not look at him. Tears fell down the old man's cheeks. I beg you. For my children. For this village. Speak. Tell the sky we are sorry. But Elua only closed her eyes. And hummed. A single low melody. Wordless. Gentle. But the clouds responded. They twisted. They danced in slow spirals above the village. Some said they saw shapes in them, Wings, eyes, hands stretching wide. The air grew heavy again. A jack pressed his forehead to the ground. "Say something, child. Anything." But she did not. Not in words. She only reached out and touched the old man's head. A spark leapt from her fingers. His sobs stopped. His breathing stilled. He rose to his feet, eyes wide, face wet. "I saw her heart," he said, voice breaking. "It's not made of fire. It's made of water." The crowd gasped. But Elua was already walking away. Not back into the village, but toward the hills, where the sky touched the earth more closely. The clouds followed. So did the birds. Even the wind turned in her direction. "She hasn't left us," someone whispered. "She's guiding it away." "No," said another, eyes shining with tears. "She's holding it back." The storm circled still, but they did not fall. They coiled above the huts. They watched the villagers work, eat, sleep. Every time a hand was raised in violence, the clouds darkened. Every time a lie was told, a whisper of thunder answered. But when a child gave his only yam to another, the clouds broke slightly, and a single beam of light kissed the ground. Elua returned only at dusk, walking the edge of the village like a silent guardian. She never spoke. But her silence taught them. They began to sing again, not songs of pleading but of thanks. They planted seeds with care, not greed. They told the stories again, stories they had buried, of the girl born with the sky in her eyes. Some said she had married the storm. Others said the storm was her child. A few swore she was the sky, come down in human form to test them. But none doubted her anymore. Not even the priest, who now spent his days feeding birds near the shrine. The storms still wait. Not with rage, but with listening ears. Waiting for Elua to speak. Waiting for her to decide if they are worthy of rain or thunder. And until then, the sky remains above them. Patient. And full. The sky had been grumbling since dawn. Not with rage, but with something quieter. Sadder. The kind of thunder that came like a slow drumbeat, echoing through bones before ears. The villagers woke to dark skies and air that smelled like wet iron. Trees leaned as if bracing themselves for something old and inevitable. They whispered her name, not with contempt, not with fear, but with awe now. Elua. She hadn't spoken a word in weeks, not since the day the sky waited for her. Her silence had become legend, her gaze a prophecy. Some said she was born from the union of cloud and earth. Others believed she was punishment made flesh. But no one dared stop her anymore. They simply watched. And on the morning the thunder cried instead of roared, they knew she was going to the gate. She walked with bare feet across the village square. The storm had already drenched the land, but her footprints were dry. Her robe clung to her body, yet no water stained its hem. The wind blew sideways, yet never touched her face. She moved like memory, like the last breath before a scream. Children huddled beside their mothers. Elders stood outside their doors, silent. The priest watched from the shrine steps with bloodless lips and trembling fingers. No one followed her. No one dared speak her name aloud. They simply watched her walk to the gate that had once been chained shut the day they exiled her. It had not been opened since. The wooden frame still bore the marks of the villagers' fear. Painted symbols faded under years of rain and regret. Rusted hinges groaned as the wind toyed with them. And standing before it now, Elua did not push, did not pull. She just stood there. The storm thickened. Lightning flashed across the horizon, jagged and fast. Thunder cracked in bursts, growing sharper with every strike. The sky swirled above her like a pot stirred too long, gray, silver, and black blending together. It should have frightened anyone else. But she tilted her chin up. And smiled. The gate shivered behind her. A bolt of lightning, thick as a tree trunk, screamed from the sky, but froze midair just above her head. It hovered, trembled, wavered like a child unsure whether to strike or embrace. The light flickered, a raw, brilliant white tinged with electric blue. The air around it warped. The ground hissed. Rain evaporated mid-fall where it passed, steam rising like incense. But Elua did not flinch. She lifted one hand, slow, open, and held it toward the trembling lightning. It lowered. A bit. And then, impossibly, it split. Not into chaos. Not into destruction. But into threads. Long, golden strands that shimmered like sunlit rivers began to unspool from the heart of the bolt. They floated gently down and wrapped themselves around her fingers, coiling like vines, soft and warm. The villagers gasped. Some fell to their knees. Some cried openly. The priest dropped his staff. Elua raised her other hand and the lightning split again, more threads, more strands floating through the storm like ribbons from heaven. And the threads did not vanish. They braided themselves into her hair. One by one. Delicate, glowing, alive. The braid formed itself slowly, deliberate, intricate. No human hand moved it, and yet it followed a rhythm older than time. The storm quieted. Thunder became a heartbeat. Rain slowed to a mist. And then, nothing. No sound. No drop. No breath. The last strand slipped into place. Her braid glowed faintly, humming with a power that was not loud but deep. Elua opened her eyes. And the sky flashed. A single blinding burst, white and blue and gold, lit up the world. The trees, the roofs, the villagers' faces, all bathed in a moment of radiant truth. Then silence. The clouds, heavy and dark just seconds ago, began to dissolve. Not drift, dissolve. They faded like fog under sunlight, revealing a sky so clear and vast it felt holy. The rain ceased, not just for that moment but completely. The earth steamed as it dried. The wind stopped. Even the birds were still. Elua turned back toward the village. The gate behind her creaked slightly, then gently shut, though no hand touched it. Her braid, now woven with living lightning, shimmered faintly with every step she took. She walked past the square, past the shrine, past the baobab tree. The villagers parted silently. They didn't speak. They couldn't. Words had become too small. But one child, a girl barely old enough to know why people feared storms, reached out as Elua passed. She touched the hem of her robe. "Does it hurt?" the child asked softly. Elua paused, turned, knelt, and for the first time in seasons she spoke. Her voice was low, like wind whispering through tall grass. Soft enough to miss, yet every person heard it. "No," she said. "It only remembers." The child frowned. "What does it remember?" Elua touched her braid. The golden strands sparkled faintly. "It remembers how they cried the first time they were struck. How they screamed. How they burned. The lightning never meant to punish. It just didn't know how to be touched." The child blinked. "And now?" Elua smiled. "Now it knows how to love." The child beamed. And somewhere above, hidden in the stillness, the sky wept again. Not with thunder. Not with rain. But with light. It poured soft golden rays across the village, like a mother stroking the faces of her children. The roofs glowed. The fields shimmered. The rivers turned to mirrors. One of the elders whispered, "The lightning did not strike her." Another answered, "It crowned her." They called that day many things in the years that followed. The day of the silent flash. The braid of the sky. The hour the storm wept. But those who were there never forgot how it felt. The weight of stillness. The warmth of impossible threads. The way pain could become memory and memory could become peace. Elua spoke only once more that day. Just before disappearing into the hills again, she turned and looked at the gathering clouds on the horizon. She raised one hand, not in warning but in greeting. "Not all storms come to destroy," she said. "Some come to remember. Some come to heal." And then she was gone. The gate remained closed. But the skies never raged the same way again. And when lightning danced across the heavens in years to come, children would point to the flickering braids of light and say, "She's brushing her hair." And the elders would bow their heads. And the earth would stay warm. And the rain would wait, just as it always had. She begins to draw in the dirt, ancient symbols no one taught her. The villagers see her kneel by the fields one morning, her fingers etching lines and curves into the dry earth. Her eyes remain half closed as if she is listening to a voice no one else can hear. The wind hushes around her. Even the birds that used to follow her fall silent. The air, thick with the weight of an approaching storm, pauses, waiting. The first symbol she carves looks like a spiral bound by thorns. The second resembles an open palm with light branching from its fingertips. When she finishes the third, a circle split by a bolt, a low hum rolls through the valley. It's not thunder. It's something deeper, like the earth remembering something. Later that day, where she knelt, the ground softens. The next morning, green shoots break through where the soil had been cracked and hopeless for years. The elders don't speak of it, but they watch from behind the woven windows of their homes. They whisper to each other at night. The chains they once used on her lie rusted and untouched by the fireside. No one dares move them. Elua begins to walk through the village not as a girl feared, but as something unknowable. Children run behind her, their laughter unsure but eager. A bird lands on her shoulder and stays there for 3 days, even through the rain. She says little. She only hums when the sky turns gray. One afternoon, a mother wails outside the healer's hut. Her child burns with fever, eyes rolled back, breath shallow. The healer says he has done all he can. The villagers gather, forming a circle, not out of concern but because they know what always follows grief, the storms. But Alua steps into the crowd without being called. The people part for her without a word. She kneels beside the mother, who looks up, eyes wild with hope and fear. Alua places her hand on the child's chest. Her fingers glow, not with fire, not with lightning, but with a soft light like dew-catching sunlight. The child gasps. What? Then again. Color returns to his face. His lips twitch. His mother sobs, rocking him. Alua rises and walks away before anyone can speak. After that, the villagers begin leaving things at her door. Baskets of fruit, hand-woven cloth, fresh water, but also offerings carved in wood. Small lightning bolts, miniature gates, tiny hands shaped from clay. Some leave apologies folded in leaves. Some simply kneel near her hut and let the wind carry what they cannot say. A week later, a tree near the edge of the village splits in two during a dry night. No storm, no thunder. Inside the tree is a hollow, and within it lies a book of bark and thread, its pages stitched with the same symbols Alua had drawn in the dirt. No one knows how it came to be there. No one touches it. The next morning Alua walks out, barefoot, eyes calm. She lifts the book, runs her fingers across it and nods once. The tree, despite its broken form, begins to bloom. She begins to teach no one and everyone. The villagers start to mimic the symbols, not always with understanding but with reverence. Some draw them on their doors. Others carve them into the gateposts. The storms still come but they no longer strike. They swirl above and pass like watchers on patrol. Lightning arcs above the mountains, but none dares touch the village again. One child begins to stutter with fear during a loud thunderclap. Alua kneels beside her, takes her hand and presses her palm into the earth. Listen, she says, her voice soft like smoke. The child does. The thunder stops. Not outside but within. The fields begin to yield double harvests. A stream that had long gone dry returns, gurgling as if it had only gone for a short walk. Trees grow straighter. Flowers bloom even in shaded corners. The elders begin to meet beneath the braided gate where Alua once stood tied. They now call it the Gate of the Sky's Mercy. But not everyone accepts the change. One man, whose father was once the one who tied Alua down during the worst storms, begins to stir doubt. He speaks of old ways and warns of powers too great for mortals. He gathers a small group who believe the storms will one day return for vengeance, and when they do, it will be because of her. They confront Alua near the stream one morning. The air is hot, heavy, crackling with an approaching storm. You are not one of us, the man says. You brought the lightning to our hearts. What if it burns us next? Alua does not reply. She kneels and places her hand in the water. The ripples stop. The wind dies. The trees fall still. Then the water begins to glow, and in its surface, the faces of those who had harmed her appear, not in anger but in sorrow. The man sees his own reflection, younger, holding a rope in one hand and a torch in the other. He falls to his knees. The others turn and leave. That night, the sky flashes 100 times but no rain falls. The lightning dances above the village, spiraling and spinning, not in rage but in celebration, as if freed. The clouds burst into soft gold light, and for a moment the entire sky seems to bow. Alua sits alone outside her home, tracing her fingers across her arms, where faint scars still remember the ropes. She does not weep. She does not sing. But when she breathes, the ground breathes with her. From that day forward, the villagers stop calling her the cursed girl. They begin to call her she who unbound the sky. They paint her symbols on the walls not as worship, but as reminders that silence is not weakness, that pain can root itself in power, and that the hands once bound in fear can become the very hands that open the heavens. The story spreads beyond Nduma. Other villages, once heavy with storms, begin to speak her name during thunder. Travelers come to see the braided gate, to press their hands into the soil where she once drew. They take the symbols with them. They take the silence too. Years pass. Alua remains the same, older but untouched by time's cruelty. Her hair now permanently holds strands of white lightning, like silk threads made of storm. Children who once ran behind her now send their own children to walk with her. One final night, as the sky glows violet with an unfamiliar storm, Alua walks to the gate alone. She places her palm upon the post. The wood hums. The storm hovers above her, waiting. She whispers something the wind does not carry. The next morning she is gone. But where she stood, the gate remains, blooming with threads of lightning that never burn, only shine. And beside it, drawn faintly in the dirt, a final symbol no one can translate. But every time a storm nears, it pauses, bends and then passes, as if bowing before it. Elua became more than girl, more than gate, more than storm. She became the silence between thunder and strike, the breath the sky takes before it remembers mercy. Years had passed since Elua vanished into the wind, her figure last seen beneath a sky stitched with silent lightning. The villagers of Nduma, once ruled by fear and superstition, had slowly changed. It began with the fields. Crops grew in full bloom even in months when drought was expected. Birds no longer scattered before a storm, they danced. Rain came like music, never flood, never drought. The sky had become a rhythm, not a threat. And at the center of every whispered story was Elua. The elders, now gray-haired and gentler, declared the gate sacred. No longer a place of punishment, it was transformed. The thick wooden beams that once held her captive were polished and wrapped with fabric strips in deep blue and silver, colors of the storm. Children were told stories of the girl who held lightning, not to scare them, but to remind them that power could come from silence, that resilience could hum louder than thunder. Then came the statue. It was carved not from marble, but from the old fig tree that had stood beside the gate for decades. The villagers said the tree had grown its roots deep into the earth Elua once touched, and so it held her memory. Sculptors from nearby regions offered their skill, but it was the village's own hands, shaky, inexperienced, yet full of love, that shaped her. They did not make her tall or mighty. Instead, they carved her seated, her palms open on her knees, her eyes turned gently to the sky. One strand of wood curved into a braid trailing down her back, and in it tiny silver threads were embedded, lightning frozen in time. At the foot of the statue they placed her old rope, now soft and fraying. It was no longer a symbol of shame but a relic of transformation. Every year, during the first storm of the season, the village gathered at the gate. Candles were lit. Threads of all colors were tied to the fence. And the people, young, old, once fearful, would sit in silence, listening. It was during these nights that the gate began to hum. Not always. Only when the sky rumbled in that low, ancient voice. The hum was subtle, felt more than heard. Some said it echoed in the chest, like a heartbeat shared with the storm. Children pressed their ears to the wood and swore they heard a song. The melody had no words, only memory. And the gate changed. Its surface, once plain and splintered, began to shift. Patterns formed, not carvings made by man, but marks raised from within the wood itself. Swirls like wind. Threads like lightning. Hands. The villagers believed the storm had left its fingerprint upon the gate, and that Elua had guided it there. One night, when the clouds rolled in low and the wind held its breath, a child wandered too close to the edge of the cliff beyond the village. Her mother screamed, her feet pounding across the mud. But before she could reach, the sky lit up, not in anger but in warning. A fork of lightning struck just ahead of the child's steps, a flash so bright it froze the moment. The girl stopped wide-eyed. Then, slowly, the wind curved around her, almost like an arm. She was unharmed. And on her wrist, the faintest mark of thread glowed briefly before fading. Word spread. Pilgrims came, not to gawk but to listen. They knelt before the gate, their hands wrapped with fabric or scarred with stories. Some wept. Some left behind tokens. Needles, braids of silver yarn, tiny wooden hands carved from olive wood. Others simply sat, waiting for the hum, for the moment the air shifted. The elders, once firm in tradition, became the first to say it aloud. She was never the curse, whispered one. She was the one who carried it away. And so, the name Elua became sacred. Children were named after her. Songs were sung at births, asking the storm to remember her kindness. No one was tied to the gate again, not for punishment, not for fear. The gate became a guardian and the sky a friend. Even when storms came, and they still did, they arrived with grace. They circled the village like dancers, never striking, always humming. And sometimes, just sometimes, a bolt of lightning would touch the ground beyond the gate, not with force but with reverence. The earth would smoke gently, and from that spot, something always bloomed. A violet. A fern. Once, a whole ring of sunflowers overnight. The villagers took these as signs that she was still watching. Some said they saw her in the clouds, a figure walking barefoot across thunder. Others claimed to have heard her voice in the rain, low and kind, calling their names. No one feared these stories. They became part of the wind, part of the rhythm. One young girl, bold and curious, once asked the oldest living elder, "Will she ever come back?" The elder smiled, his eyes moist with memory. She never left, he said. She is the hum in the wood, the pause in the thunder, the hand that steers the lightning away. The gate remembers because she gave it her silence. And that silence now sings. And so the storms continued. But they came with softer voices. And the gate stood tall, humming with memory, held together not by nails or rope, but by the girl who had once watched the clouds and dared to lift her hand.